So I do not want to get into that. But since you have called me, I have to tell something from my mind, which I feel I will talk to you a different subject today, or different perspective of climate change today. That is the politics of climate change. So let's start with the COP28 just concluded. Okay, the COP is, you all know, the United Framework Convention of the Climate Change, that is UNFCCC, is considered as the parent convention for all the international climate change negotiations. UNFCCC, along with its protocol, defines how the climate change aspect is to be dealt with, particularly in a regulatory framework by various countries. And Conference of Parties is the annual conference of the convention, where all the high level means, I mean the top level of the country meets, decide, discuss, deliberate, and decide on the pathway or the roadmap how this particular issue, which is a global menace, to be addressed. So in COP28, the chairman made two statements which have become very controversial, or you can say that it has been slightly away from the normal thought process. Number one, he questioned the genesis of climate change itself. He asked whether this climate change is real, a threat because of the human, the anthropogenic, or it's a man-made, or it's a natural process. That is a number one. Number two, he also mentioned that there is no clear science to support this climate change, particularly to relate it with the fossil fuel emissions. So these two statements coming from the chairman of the COP28, which is expected to define the role of the community society to deal with this current situation. But just first see what is the merit of what he is saying. In my opinion, what he said regarding the first part, regarding the climate change, whether it is natural or it's man-made, there is something merited in what he is saying. If you see the 800,000 history of the planet, you can see at least there were 8 cycles, the famous glacial cycles and interglacial cycles, or you call the Miklav's cycle, whatever name it called be, there has been cycles of climate change varying from 10,000 to 100,000 years. Then you have got the shorter version of that, which varies from 200 to 1,500 years. So even then we have the smaller version, which is because of the interaction between the ocean and the land, which is like a El Nino, which may happen from 2 to 7 years time. So the climate change has been there, climate change is there, and climate change will be there. It is a natural process, it will keep on happening. But what is the concern today? The concern today is the pace in which this transfer change takes place. The manner in which it is taking, the disruptive nature in which this change is taking place. That is what the cause of concern. Now, regarding the second part of it, whether there is any scientific evidence, if you see the several studies, if we can say that in 2019, around 97% of the climate scientists were aligned with that it is an issue, has to be addressed. Today, in 2023, almost 100% is almost aligned with that, perhaps maybe 1 to 2% exception. The reason being is that after the industrialization, once you have started using the fossil fuel, the carbon content of the atmosphere has tremendously increased from 280 ppm, then it became in 90s, it became 350, now it is around 415 to 425. So it's an alarming way in which it is going, so it needs to be addressed. So in both ways, it counters what the statement of the chairman of the climate change, the COP28. So how did he make this such a statement? So there lies the politics of climate change. So to understand that, we should first know who is the chairman of this COP28. Ladies and gentlemen, the chairman of the COP28 was Dr. Mohammed Al Jaber. He is the CEO of one of the lead oil producing companies, or oil refining companies, you can say, whatever you call it, the Abu Dhabi National Oil Company. So just imagine, that is not the end of it. Among the participants, among the delegates, it is clearly established that almost 70% of the delegates were directly or indirectly sponsored by the oil companies. Around 2,456 were the number of delegates which have come through various big oil companies alone. On the other hand, the official delegates fell around somewhere around 300. That means almost 10 times, we can say, was non-state actors in a convention or in a forum which is expected to be a state-sponsored one. So, and you see that when it was happening in Dubai itself, there were around 4,000 delegates only from Dubai. That again sponsored by the state. So you understand what is going to be the decision coming out of such a forum. So what was it ultimately came out? The issue was that there is the climate change issue, all this has to be done. But regarding the fossil fuel, there has to be an orderly and equitable way to address that. So in other ways, it has started, it is the beginning of the end of the fossil fuel. That's what we can say. So this is what is called the one side of the politics of climate change. So what happened? Why is it so? To understand that, you should come to know one of the most prominent disinvestment or divestment campaign today is against the fossil fuel companies. It started in 2015, and by 2023, around 1,590 institutions have pledged to that or undertaken disinvestment in oil companies, which cost around $40 trillion to the various oil companies. In other sense, if the way in which the decision to phase out the fossil fuel is going to move ahead, the foundation stones of these oil companies, or including the oil countries which is thriving on the oil, is going to be destroyed. So that is what is called the climate politics. In that, if you go to further into nitty-gritties, in every year, the big oil companies like the Exxons spends around $2 billion to make campaign against this climate change issues. Means the climate change issues being projected. There are studies which shows that the hundreds of senior professors and research scholars from the prestigious institutes like in Europe and in States are being sponsored by the oil companies to make studies countering this climate change issue. So that is what it is. So in other ways, the first phase of the politics is climate change politics of corporates. Second is the climate change of responsibilities. What does this mean? What do you mean that today the whatever happens because of the GHG emission is not the creation of the developing countries like India. It is the overexploitation and over-industrialization of the developed countries which has happened to this situation. Because the retention period of carbon dioxide is almost around 200 years. So whatever accumulated one is not created by us. It was created by somebody else during the previous system. That is what is called the historical contributions. If you see the historical contribution of the emissions today, more than 50%, even today, more than 50% is only from a few countries of the world. You can say a handful of countries. To be precise, if you're talking about the United States, even today, 24% of the global fossil fuel emissions today is created by the United States. On the other hand, what is the contribution from a country like India with such a population is less than 4%. So there is a larger responsibility. The question here was addressed by the UNFCCC and its Kyoto Protocol was that, yes, there is a global issue, but it has to be addressed through global measures, but there has to be a difference in the responsibility towards that. Those who have created this mess have got a larger responsibility to be addressed. So that is why the fundamental principle of common but differentiated responsibility, or CBDRRC, came into the picture. So there it says that the Kyoto Protocol says that there are Annex 1 and Annex 2 countries. Annex 1 countries, which are developed countries, has got the quantified responsibility to limit their emissions. On the other hand, the Annex 2 countries, it's voluntary. Whatever possible from there, based on their national circumstances. These are the fundamental principles on which the UNFCCC was working on. But what happened subsequently? Subsequently, by 2020, the Kyoto Protocol is no more in place. Not even developed or developing countries was keen to renew it or get it extended. So the principle of CPDRRC virtually has taken for a course. So in its place, the Paris summit brought in the concept of the loss and damage or the fund to compensate those who are affected. The developed countries pledged an annual contribution of around 100 billion from 2019 onwards. So what is the stand today? What, first of all, you think, what is this 100 billion? So that time the developing countries thought it is going to be a phenomenal amount. But what is the fact? The impact studies show that the impact on developing countries just because of this climate changes issue is around 16 trillion. And where is 16 trillion to be compensated by the 100 billion? Even then, even this 100 billion, what is the present status as of today? So last year, if you're seeing around 80, that is a maximum which I've read, around 80 to 85 billion has been pledged or it has been told it has been contributed. But if you cross analysis, you will see that none of the lead countries who have promised in huge have done nothing towards that. Whatever has come in is through the private contributions. That too as loans. And there is a huge doubts regarding the exaggerated figures regarding this contribution. That means it is, if I'm saying that I have contributed 10 billion, that is, yes, who is going to verify that? How is it going to be verified? So it is all a mess. It is far from reality. That is what is called the politics of responsibility. Then comes the politics of equity. What does it mean? So today, the world is saying that India is one of the largest emitters, perhaps the third one. First is China, second is US, and third is India. Yes, true. But see the other side of it. In United States, with around 4% of the world population, contributes around 15% of the emission. On the hand, countries like India, with 18% of the percentage, contributes around 7%. If you're seeing the equity, means equity per capita emission, which is based on which is the realistic yardstick for a common platform. The per capita emission from United States is 17.6. On the other hand, a country like India, it is around less than 2. This is what the disparity which we are talking about. So this with a huge kind of, so today, if you are seeing the simple terms, if you are putting across, the emission by one person in United States is 1% is 100 times more than the person in Congo. Or if you start this 1st of January 2024, on the first day itself, a person in United States must have consumed or the carbon credit for a person in Congo or another country for a year altogether. By the end of a week, the first week itself, they must have surpassed even the 23 lower countries. So this is the disparity in the emission per capita emission. So this is what is called the politics of equity. Then comes the politics of fossil fuel. What is the contention of the always being that restrict the production of fossil fuel, which includes the what you call the oil as well as the coal. India is being targeted for coal. So on the side, why are you talking about the production? Why don't you talk about the consumption? Those who drink or use like this one, if you are stopping it, automatically the production also will come down. Instead of that, why are you targeting the production? To understand that, you should understand production of, the politics of fossil fuel. If you see, even today, after so much of halagula, if you're saying the next 50 years, up to 2050, who is invested or who is planning to invest more in oil production? If you see the 50% is coming from a few countries like US or UK or some other countries. 50% of the production commitment which is going to be for the oil. On the one side, you are talking about the restrict the coal which is being there in India, the oil production in other areas, but you yourself is going for the oil production. A country which is fighting against the coal production in India, Germany. Germany has revived all their coal plants today after the Ukraine crisis. So how do we justify this kind of fossil fuel disparity? Why? Because the fossil fuel today is getting almost the developed countries have already utilized it. Now they are moving to shale gas or some other form. On the other hand, small countries in Africa, they are going to just found out certain kind of oil well with them, to which they can utilize to develop themselves. That is going to be restricted there. So that is what is called the politics of fossil fuel. Lastly, the politics of subsidy. What do you mean by this? What I mean by this is that all the countries in the world, the fossil fuel or the fuel which is used for the day-to-day function are being subsidized. On the one side, you talk about the carbon taxation. On the other hand, just see the kind of subsidy which is offered. In a year, a country like China is the subsidy on fossil fuel alone is 2.2 billion. Why China? Talk about United States. The subsidy offered by them is 757 million in a year. To put it in a different perspective, in a country like Sharjah or Qatar or Doha, the personal subsidy given for petroleum product is somewhere around $14,000 per year per person. On the other hand, you just think about a place like a Congo, where a person's per capita income is $500. In India, somewhere you can say around $2,000. One time, even compared with India, even a person who is going to have the entire living with $2,000, a person in Doha or Qatar is getting 7 times more subsidy only on his petroleum products to run his car. That is what is called the politics of subsidy. So this kind of disparity, this kind of contradiction, this kind of hypocrisy is what is the general terms the politics of climate change today. So that is what I was telling. I will take you to a different perspective towards this. So, but the question here is that in a scenario like this, are we advocating against this? So as a country, where do you stand? Or as an engineer, where should take the forward? In my opinion, see, India, we are in a crossroads. This is one of the best opportunities before us to get out of this traditional historical legacy of fossil fuel dependency. So this is the best opportunity. Number two, we have the inherent advantage both in geographically and demographically. So these are our capital investment today. And based on that, we should be able to turn around the global equation today, global balance today, economic situation today. So we should go for it without any doubt. That is one part of it. Second, we engineers, where do we stand? There is a saying, the engineer's profession is noble. Why? If you're talking about the advocates, they want criminals to come up so that their cases will increase. So they encourage criminal activities in the country. Doctors want patients to develop their progress. So they encourage the disease strategy to come up. So all negative. On the other hand, engineer survival depend upon the growth of the society. Their upbringing brings more scope for us to work. So that is why the engineers are considered to be noble. But I feel in present situation, it is slightly different. The climate change, which is a destructive mode, is bringing us opportunities. A tremendous amount of opportunities in case of technology, in case of fuel, whatever you said, it is the plethora of opportunities before us. So it is for us to capitalize on this and go forward with the trend which is there against the climate change. So one side it is a social obligation, other side as a professional way also, engineers, it is going to be a great situation for us in our advantage. With this, let me conclude. So I will once again thank the entire team of the Institute of Engineers for calling me here. And from the maritime sector, I must say that one of the one of the pioneers going to be there in climate change in the transition to green fuel would be the maritime, because of it is a peculiar regulatory framework which works in. Once the international regulator, the IMO, decides on something like that, I don't think much of a route is there for the industry to play around. So the transition is going to happen. All the message of those who have participated in various IMO meetings will be have the clear understanding that there is no way back. We are going ahead. So there will be a lot of opportunities. Also challenges will be there. At the same time, there will be a lot of opportunities. So please, all the engineers outside the maritime sector, please come and partner with us. With this, thank you very much once again for inviting me. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for a lot of insight, information. A lot of things was alarming and it was new to me. To carry on with this program, let me now call on to the moderator, Mr. S.M. Rai. He was the first graduate engineer from Rajasthan to join the Merchant Navy as a marine engineer. He joined and stayed with the Shipping Corporation of India and was later absorbed in the management cadre and served as a general manager. During his tenure, he was in charge of new ship acquisition and buildings and headed the management and operations of the ships. Post superannuation, he served as a director, technical at the Indian National Ship Owners Association, assisting in planning and projecting Indian maritime policies, acts, conventions with the government of India. He was the chairman of Institute of Marine Engineers, Mumbai, and was also the chief editor of MERI. He is the recipient of several maritime awards, and even today he's serving the maritime industry in various capacities. Rai sir has a distinction of being a member of the Indian delegation for years to IMO London, a body of the United Nations, and continues to be a senior member of the core team. Currently, he is actively involved with several national and international maritime committees, journals, and classification societies. Rai sir, over to you. Can you unmute, sir?
Thank you, Mr. Mehra, and thanks for the very detailed introduction. But I'm really grateful again to the Institute of Engineers to have called us today and taken a very interesting subject of this climate change. And I'm indeed thankful to Sri Sukumaran for highlighting about COP28 also. I'm sure I will be talking to him on the subjects on our other meetings when we meet there. Anyway, today's topic, as Sri Sukumaran said, is very live and very burning topic of climate change, global warming. As I said, the topic is very interesting and it is indeed, I mean, a matter of great concern for the humanity and society, because climate change, which actually started way back in 1992 with the United Nations Framework Convention for Climate Change were formed, and thereafter several of our committee of parties meetings took place and many major decisions were taken, because global warming and climate change really causing a lot of impact and effect on the this particularly our health of the human being, then on the rising sea levels which have endangered the foods, etc., ocean warming, then flooding, the greenhouse effect, melting of ice, and so many other impact. I will actually not detail. I will invite Sri Mukherjee, one of another very senior maritime or engineer at actually stationed in Singapore. I happen to know him for decades now. He has been very active in many fronts, and I'm sure he will be talking about industries which are impacted by the global warming and effect, and also the impacts, what impact it has caused. Shri Siddhe Mukherjee is chairman and group managing director of Blossom International Shipping Offshore Private Limited. He is engineering graduate, Fellow of Institute Marine Engineer UK, and several other association and chartered engineer. He is a winner of many prestigious awards in maritime and shipping industries, including LT, and have been speaker at various conferences worldwide. He has his own business, as I said, chairman and managing director of Singapore Blossom Group of Shipping Companies and maritime industry since 2003. He is serving as president and chairman in many different alumni also. He is in the advisory board and investors in a few startup companies, including technology companies such as HAL and FinTech, etc. He is a past director of Singapore Indian Chamber of Commerce. Actually, the list goes on. Mr. Mukherjee will excuse me. Time is running short, so I will cut that short and invite you to speak on the subject. I am sure you will detail about the industries which are impacted because of this global warming and change in climatic conditions, and also the impact on the general, whether it is on the crops or the human beings or on the seas or on the general public. So over to Sri Mukherjee.
Is it okay? Good afternoon and good day to everybody, because I believe people are in different countries, so I must address everybody correctly. Now, good day to Mr. Engineer Ajit Kumar Sukumaran, Chief Guest, Dr. Ranganathan, sorry, slide. President-elect IEI, Engineer Anand Jajwani, Chairman IEE MSc, Mr. SM Rai, Moderator, Commander Dr. Bhaskar, who is the convener of the event, and distinguished ladies and gentlemen. The topic of the day, as you know, is the climate change, global warming. Of course, it's carbon capture, which will incidentally go to storage and utilization. To begin with, I must mention that I'm a naturalist and ardent lover of nature, which inspired me to speak on various forums, including on climate change and global warming. Now we go to the climate change. I make it a little bit short, as I think Mr. Sukumaran has given in-depth analysis of many things, including some numbers. So I must say the Earth's average surface temperature is rising. The Intergovernment Panel, that is the IPCC, and their reports indicate that the Earth's surface temperature has increased by 1.1 degree Celsius above the pre-industrial level. The climate has also become more wetter and drier. The maritime industries, which are affected by physical climate risks, are very important for our discussion today. Its ports, sea level rise pose a threat to coastal infrastructure, such as ports, infrastructures, harbors, marinas, shipyards, and shipping facilities. Sea level rise may cause coastal erosion. Harbors, as the frequency and the intensity of the storm increases, coastal infrastructure, including shipyards and harbors, face higher risk. Now let's go to the commercial shipping. Now I've been involved on the commercial side of the shipping also. And climate change can alter ocean currents, affecting maritime navigation and shipping routes. Changes in currents may lead to shifts in the distribution of marine resources, impacting fishing operations. Disruptions due to extreme weather can cause a range of issues. And the issues are not limited to one, including missed port calls and delayed ETA, which will necessitate to change schedules for discharging and loading of cargoes, among many other issues. Another incident is the lost cargo. Lost cargo has obviously significant financial and insurance impacts. We all know during COVID, many containers are overstacked, and the number of containers which has fallen outside is quite a reasonable number, but Bloomberg estimates that the financial loss due to the containers falling overboard in the past 4 months of 2021 were USD 54.5 million, which is very high. Okay, now we go to global warming. IPCC reports say that released on March 20, 2023 by UN Environmental Program, UNEP, suggests that the current pledges under Paris Agreement put the world on track for 2.5 to 2.9 degrees Celsius temperature rise above the pre-industrial levels this century, far above the 1.5 degrees centigrade limit. First would have been set to avoid the worst impacts on climate change. This warming has occurred predominantly since mid-20th century. Now, global warming refers to increase in Earth's surface temperature due to emission of greenhouse gases into the atmosphere. Now, the main causes of global warming: burning of fossil fuels, cutting down forests, and farming livestock are increasingly influence the climate and Earth's temperature. This adds enormous amounts of greenhouse gases to those naturally occurring in the atmosphere, increasing the greenhouse effect and global change. The top 4 countries, I think Mr. Sukumaran also mentioned, the top 4 countries which are responsible for 3/4 of the world's coal-fired electricity are China, India, United States, and Japan. And Germany also is included there. Now, impact of global warming effect on ocean. Melting of ice, as you all know, ocean warming, ocean acidification, rising sea level. Sea level rise is caused primarily due to 2 factors related to global warming: the added water from melting ice and the expansion of seawater as it warms. Coastal flooding due to sea level rise. Greenhouse effect. The greenhouse effect is the process through which heat is trapped near Earth's surface by substance known as greenhouse gases. Now we talk about carbon capture. The carbon capture or separation of carbon dioxide emissions before they're released into the atmosphere is called carbon capture. Carbon utilization means finding productive and economically viable uses for the captured carbon. Carbon storage is the underground storage of carbon to prevent its release into the atmosphere. For this, there is something called carbon credit. Now, that is the tradable permit or certificate and transparent and measurable. Now, what is the benefit of buying the carbon credit? This will give you the right to emit 1 ton of carbon dioxide or an equivalent amount of another greenhouse gas. Now, to create a financial incentive for business to reduce the carbon footprints and invest in cleaner, more sustainable business practices. Now, while carbon credits offer several benefits, it's essential to note that they are not a silver bullet for addressing climate change. They should complement, not replace, direct efforts to reduce emissions at their source. Additionally, the effectiveness of carbon credit projects requires careful monitoring, verification, and transparency to ensure real and additional emissions of reduction. In 2022, international shipping alone accounted for nearly 3% of world greenhouse gas emissions. The transportation sector, including shipping, is responsible for about 20.2% of world's CO2 emissions, making it the second largest contributor to global contribution to carbon emissions. Now let's think of the aviation accounts. Aviation accounts for 2.5% of the global emission. However, 3.5% when we take into account the non-CO2 impacts on climate account in emissions. So CCUS solutions have to be decoupled from emission sources. Renewable energy, electric vehicles, biofuels, and hydrogen economy are all carbon neutral at best. We need negative emission technologies to be secured and scaled up agonistically to emit emission sources. The energy footprints technology is a critical factor. We need technologies based on
head office of Singapore Labs.
Unlike the current processes that emit more than the capture. Anyways, CCUS in details will be presented by my colleague, Mr. Sauradev Basak, the next speaker. On the subject of COP28, I have the full details, but I will cut it short as Mr. Sukumaran has mentioned quite a lot, which is very much of great interest to all of us. Now, the 28th United Nations Climate Change Conference was held in Dubai, as all of us know, on 30th of November to 12th December, where now the section I will elaborate is following 5 sections crucial to climate change were discussed. This is the last and the latest conference till today. Now, stock take was the first time the stock take was discussed. For the first time, countries have been mandated to demonstrate their progress in implemented climate goals since the advent of the Paris Agreement in 2015. This is designed as a form of inventory taking at a crucial inflection point halfway between the historic treaty in 2015 and 2030, spanning over 15 years, the year by which climate science has determined much needs to be achieved. I presume I am avoiding certain things which Mr. Sukumaran already mentioned. So I will go to certain section. I can't remember exactly what all he said, but I roughly know what he said. Global emissions need to be nearly half by the end of decade for the world to limit global temperature rise to 1.5 degrees Celsius, a key metric to avoid the absolute worst impacts of climate change. Preliminary findings is not very encouraging, I must say, and tell everybody, and indicate that the progress to reduce carbon emissions has been painfully slow. But it points an optimistic picture, though, about the role of global talks to change the trajectory. At COP28, governments have looked at the report, and hopefully it would help nations to change course to reset or pathways as necessary. Again, as rightfully Mr. Sukumaran mentioned about the geopolitical subject, I would concur that one and I'll agree with that one. Anyway, the next section is shadow of a disaster fueled year. 1 year since the last COP negotiations in Egypt have been another expression of anger over a fast warming planet. Leading science indicates, as far as we can see, that changes to the climate that are caused by human activity is the primary cause of intensifying and damaging the weather phenomenon. That means we are the main culprits of the subject. The planet recorded the hottest 3-month period during the Northern Hemisphere summer from June to August this year and 2023. This is also in 2023, is on track to be the second hottest known history, if not the most hottest. That means June to August this year must have been the hottest in the history of the world. Record heat waves were also felt across large belt of Europe, leading to damaging wildfires and followed by damaging rainstorms. More than 10,000 people died after severe flooding when Storm Daniel struck Libya, while Hong Kong, Taiwan, and southern China were hit by 2 typhoons, Saola and Haiki. Australia is again bracing for another catastrophic fire summer, and Southeast Asia for prolonged drought conditions, following the onset of El Nino climate conditions, which bring warmer temperatures and less waterfall. The disasters have made a mark of major polluter, which includes the United States, as well as recorded no less than 23 separate billion-dollar weather and climate disasters in the first 8 months of this year. That's also another new record. The extent of damage and loss experience and the ghost of worse days to come will halt these negotiations. Phasing out of the fossil fuel, I think this is something which Mr. Sukumaran said, and I agree with him because Dr. Sultan Al Jaber he is the chairman of ADNOC. One of the biggest question marks hanging over COP28 is the role of the oil tycoon who was sitting in the conference's biggest chair. Dr. Sultan presided over the negotiations while at the same time remaining in his role as the head of the country's national oil company ADNOC. It is a duality that has sparked anger amongst us. and advocates and cast doubt over the viability of the global talks to deliver the ambitious green agenda. In Dubai, European Union member states led a group of people to totally phase out the unabated use of fossil fuels. Oil-producing nations have stood in the way of a push to phase out of the use of the fossil fuels. At previous COPs, languages in the final agreement, this is to be noted, has been watered down in concession to those nations, and the same contest and the resistance is expected in future. Regardless, world energy systems are changing despite a global energy crisis inflamed by Ukrainian war, which is of course a force majeure and we cannot control it. The International Energy Agency reported in October that fossil fuels still make up about 80% of energy, but investment in clean energy has risen. It is now 40% since 2020, and momentum behind wind, solar, and other green technologies could see fossil fuel use peak before 2030 as far as IEA is concerned. A downturn in the Chinese economy may be a little bit advantageous, could see its overall fossil fuel demand, especially from coal use, and its emission decline at a scale that has significant scope to shift the climate needle. Hunt for climate financing solutions. This is very, very important. Developed countries have repeatedly failed to mobilize the promised US 100 billion per year for developing countries between 2020 and 2025. The money is meant to be provided to help poorer nations mitigate and adapt to the impacts of climate change, but has never been fulfilled. This year was the first time it is expected to happen, we feel. A new type of climate finance is required. A new type of climate finance goal has been discussed at COP28, given that even the US 100 billion goal is just a fraction of what needs to be unlocked to help developing nations to achieve their goals under the Paris Agreement. Again, meanwhile, tensions still remain high around a loss and damage fund. Loss and damage is the notion that developed nations responsible for climate change should provide financial assistance to nations suffering the worst impacts. It was a major striking point in Dubai and leaves many vulnerable nations still exposed to the high cost and disasters besetting them. Deforesting talks. After 2021, which saw global deforestation level drop by 6.3%, the rate of land being raised was back up again by 4% to 2022. Some 6.6 million hectares were lost last year. That is equivalent to the size of the country Sri Lanka. That's very amazing. At COP26 in Glasgow, 145 countries signed a pledge to halve and reverse forest loss and land degradation by 2030 as a tool to combat climate change. Despite the pledge, deforestation trends are pointing the wrong way. That means the other way around, raising the heat on the need for constructive talks beyond COP2028. The globe remains well off track on reaching 2030 goal, but certain countries, including Malaysia and Indonesia, home to some of the most important rainforests in the world and center of discussion, have made more significant progress in slowing down deforestation, which is something we must appreciate. Major sticking points for Indonesia to maintain its commitment to the pledge exist around the palm oil industry and the hindrance for similar farmers, in particular to meet sustainability certification standards required by the European Union buyers, a crucial export market. Amazon nations had also failed earlier to agree unified deforestation goal at the summit in August. Now we look at the takeaway. Main outcomes agreed at the UN talks in Dubai. I think Mr. Sukumaran may be more familiar than me, but I must say what I know. The annual climate summit is done and dusted in Dubai. That's what I feel. What were the wins and the disappointment? Is it historic or it's a hollow victory? Perhaps the biggest omission is the absence of firm promises by rich countries to help the poor cousins meet the commitment to ditch the fossil fuels by mid-century. Developing nations will need at least US 6 trillion in financing by 2030 to reach this goal. This is the UN estimate. The new COP deal vaguely waves a hand at that mountain of money without getting into the details about the pay for what they have to pay. The commitment is included in the first global stock take of how countries can accelerate action to meet the goals of the landmark Paris Agreement. However, many countries walked away from the talks, frustrated at the lack of clear call for a fossil fuel phase out this decade, and a lot of loopholes in the text that might enable production and consumption of coal, oil, gas, and gas to continue. This is to be seen. We cannot comment on this more. Despite an early breakthrough on launching a fund to pay for loss and damage from climate change, developing countries were left disappointed by a lack of new financial commitments for transiting away from fossil fuel and admitting to climate impacts. COP28 present and oil COP28 president and the oil executive Dr. Sultan, the world first achievement of getting fossil fuels in humid climate. That's what he mentioned. However, his presidency was overshadowed by allegations that UAE intended to use this platform to make oil and gas deals, which we don't know, we are not for sure. Away from the negotiations, COP28 brought a wave of new international pledges covering everything from oil and gas, company emissions, and tripling renewables through to food systems and how the world can better integrate action on climate change and biodiversity loss. We firmly believe that our discussions of today will not be dusted away after today, and the world, and especially we, including our organization, speakers, panel of panelists and moderators who are present here today, will take up the matter seriously and bring to the knowledge of the final decision. Now I must thank some people. It was great to see so many distinguished figures, not excluding the past chairman of SCI, Mr. Sabyasachi Hajara, Kaushik Sil, President IMARI EI, Ms. Eileen Yu, Chairman ICS, Ivan Stock, Joint Branch of IMAREST and RINA. There are people from other countries. Over and above, my close friend, Dr. Gaffy Dufay, maybe some people don't know him. He is the Professor Emeritus of University of Michigan Business School, USA for Corporate Strategy and International Business, and also Professor Emeritus of Finance. He has been involved in senior advisor supporting the corporate governance of McKinsey and company in Asia. Actually, he was invited by Monetary Authority of Singapore also. When Mr. Tharman, the current president, he was the chairman of Monetary Authority of Singapore. Let's also hope that COP29, the United Nations next climate conference in 2024, which is expected to be held in November 2024, dates November 18 to 11 to 24th in Azerbaijan, which is located at the boundary of Eastern Europe and West Asia, result in a clearer solution. My tagline, the best way to get started is to quit talking and begin doing. We need action. Start your decarbonization journey with us today. Finally, I must thank the convener, Dr. Bhandarkar, who requested me to do a presentation on climate change for the Institute of Engineers of India and the Institute of Marine Engineers of India. And happy to see so many people registered from different countries. Thank you all. Thank you very much. And now I hand over to my friend, Mr. Rai, who is the moderator, and he will take over from now. Thank you all. Thank you very much. Bye.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mukherjee, for a very elaborate and detailed explanation about your global warming, climate change, etc. You dealt with the rise of sea level, change in rain, wildfires, deforestation, melting of glaciers, and including human ailments, because all pandemics are impacted or affected because of the
You
global
are
warming.
absolutely right, sir. You are absolutely right. Yeah.
Similarly, deforestation and agriculture side also, because of acid rains and etc. So I think there are some questions. We'll come back to you. You also dealt with the Paris Agreement of 1995 and dealt with the very sensitive issue of those $100 billion which were committed way back until today. Nobody has agreed or has been doing. There were other thing which was there was a transfer of technology that developed countries had agreed that they will do the transfer of technology. That was also not bad. I'm happy you also dealt with COP28. There has been a lot of diverse opinion, including, I must say, even this time in India, they were not very happy to do away with fossil fuels so early. Though at MEPC, Indian delegation also is pleading for 2030 and 2050. But India and China, of course, was very reserved on that. One thing which I would like to add to what you're this that one of the major issue which is controversial or which is not being taken lightly, that Paris Agreement has said polluters must pay. So that polluters must pay issue is very sensitive. We will deal with during our question answer session also. I will come back to that. But now let us call our other speaker of the day, Mr. Suryodaya Basak. He is a Bigotech Private Limited Singapore and also a member of the Blossom Group. That's a news to me that he's working with Mr. Mukherjee as well. He's a research scholar from Tari School of Advanced Studies, New Delhi, India, and has developed and successfully prototyped a carbon capture, utilization, and storage, CCUS. And a new process, which I must admit, Mr. Suryodaya, I would like to know more. I have not heard about Azonian process. There are about 40 processes which have been approved and under discussion at IMO and United Nations, but Azonian process is still unheard of. So I will be very interested to know about that. It is also operational cost, I believe, is about 10 times cheaper than the prevailing direct air capture technology, and capital cost 20 times smaller. Furthermore, the Azonian process has been tested in 3 Indian climate zones: hot, dry, hot, and humid composite, and the results are extremely promising. So, Mr. Suryodaya, I will be indeed very interested to know about what is about this Azonian process, because at the end of the day, I must say that life cycle analysis has said that unless the CO2 which is generated by various sources, whether it's fossil fuels or whether it is by burning coals, etc., it must be absorbed. Otherwise, if it is not taken away, it will do even more harm to global warming and this one. So your presentation would be very interesting. And I must also let the participant know that carbon capture has just been introduced, knowing the life cycle analysis when we discussed at the Marine Environmental Protection Committee about the global warming, etc. We all said that it is all right to do away with the current generation which are doing CO2, but what is happening about the CO2 which is already there or which is generated one way or the other? So what we do about that? So it will be very interesting. So Mr. Suryodaya, you take over now. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rai, for that wonderful introduction. I hope I'm audible.
Yep.
Okay. Yes. So before I start presenting, the formal presentation, just think of this as, firstly, I am very honored, overwhelmed, and privileged to be part of such a distinguished panel. I am very, very young compared to the other distinguished panelists. I am merely 27 years old, so forgive me if I feel a little out of place sometimes. But taking on the questions that Mr. Rai started with, these are wonderful questions, right? So the first question is life cycle analysis. That is a wonderful term, right? So it means cradle to grave analysis. From life until death, we do a total calculation, and then we have to maintain the planet in equilibrium. So before I start the formal presentation, I would like to just think of this as an informal, casual lecture, right? A 30-minute introduction to a different form of carbon capture. It's more philosophy and technology. So that's the beauty of this entire process. So number one, carbon dioxide is not the only greenhouse gas. The problem that we are facing today, as Mr. Sukumaran beautifully surmised the entire politics, history, and climate justice, right? So, regardless, these are wonderful debates, but that doesn't change what climate change actually is. It is a problem. And we are the first species in the history of the planet that have the opportunity to stop our own extinction. And that is a marvelous opportunity. So we are the first species to actually stop our own extinction. There have been 8 mass extinctions in the history of the Earth. This is probably going to be the next one, hopefully not. So number one, this is caused by the greenhouse effect, as rightly pointed out by the other panelists, which is essentially once the concentration of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere increases, the incoming radiation from the sun cannot all escape back to the atmosphere. As a result of which, the atmosphere in general retains more heat. So that's fact number one, that greenhouse gases and their concentrations rapidly increasing in the atmosphere are the cause of the problem. Number two, carbon dioxide is the most dominant greenhouse gas due to fossil fuel burning over the last 300 years since the industrial era. But it's not the only greenhouse gas, right? In fact, carbon dioxide is used as the unit of measuring the global warming potential of other greenhouse gases. So carbon dioxide's global warming potential is 1, methane is 28, nitrous oxide is 298. I will not speak about other gases, but I hope these 3 gases are in everybody's mind once we start speaking. Methane is almost 30 times more potent than carbon dioxide, and nitrous oxide is almost 300 times more potent than carbon dioxide as a greenhouse gas. Now, another wonderful question raised by Mr. Rai is, it's good to be carbon neutral in the future through renewable energy or biofuels or electric vehicles, but what about the emissions that are already up there? I think that was a point that Mr. Sukumaran also told about, which is historical emissions. So I'll start sharing my screen now, and please let me know if it's visible. Is my presentation visible?
Yeah, it's visible.
Okay,
It's visible.
I'll just start. Right. So I'll quickly summarize these slides because Mr. Mukherjee has already spoken at depth about carbon capture, about the history and details about global warming. Let me just minimize this. Right. So these are 2 figures that we need to know. The first is that our gigatons of carbon dioxide equivalent, give or take. So you will notice that the units are carbon dioxide equivalent, which means that we take all greenhouse gas emissions and translate them into units of carbon dioxide equivalent. But more concerning is that we have about 2,500 gigatons of carbon dioxide already in the atmosphere. So we call them historical or legacy emissions. Now, we have a remaining budget of about 500 gigatons from 2020 onwards. And that too for a 50% probability of limiting climate change to 1.5 degrees Celsius, which I'm sure that listening to the other panelists, you will realize is a very bleak possible future, right? The probability of that happening is very low. Now, the present state of carbon capture, when we talk about carbon capture, the first mental block that we have to get out of is that carbon capture does not necessarily have to be coupled to emission sources. Carbon capture doesn't have to happen at source, right? So that is the number one fact that I want everybody to acknowledge, right? So if you look at the first bullet, all the technologies that are mentioned are essentially assuming that there is a stack or an emission source of the carbon dioxide. And all of these technologies are to be fitted at that particular point, right? And when we talk about traditional carbon capture utilization technologies, so the captured carbon is then recovered. It is then processed and transported either underground or under the seawater. Now, as you can understand, if you perform a life cycle analysis on these processes, this entire process might be ingenious, but it is very energy intensive. We will discuss the costs later, right? So right now, with these technologies, the best of this technology is called the direct air capture, right? So it's called DAC. It is the best technology currently in the world for technological approaches to carbon capture. So that's the benchmark of the world, right? So when we talk about carbon capture, if nothing else is mentioned, we assume we are talking about DAC, because the largest carbon capture plant in the world currently is also DAC based. It's based in Reykjavik, the capital of Iceland, and the annual carbon capture capacity is around 4,000 tons of carbon dioxide equivalent per year. So that being said, this technology was patented back in 2008, but standing here 15 years later, there are only 15 direct air capture plants operational worldwide, right? So there is a liquid solvent process, there is a solid solvent process. In summary, there can be a lot of processes, right? But ultimately, the entire process requires more emissions to operate than it captures, right? Even if we assume that the energy balance or the emissions balance is positive, even then you are chipping away at the efficiency of the process by making it energy dependent. Despite these developments, the costs have not been able to come down to such a level that it can be scaled up. Currently, the best rates in the world for carbon capture are about $250 per ton of carbon dioxide, right? So that is offered by a company called Climeworks, which is a Swiss-based company. And so they report a levelized cost of retail of carbon at 1 credit of carbon, they are selling at $250. So we would now like to introduce our process. So the Ozonian process is very recently developed. In fact, I am currently in the midst of my PhD, under which I have developed the entire process, made business models, and taken it to scale across all climate zones of India. So this is a process that has been recently filed for a patent by me. So as a result of which there has been no discussion about this process in the world anywhere. So this is probably the first public platform on which I'm divulging what the technology is. Now, this is a very counterintuitive approach to climate change. Now, what I would like for the participants as well as for other panelists is to stop me at any point of time if you need any clarification, because we need it to be a lucid presentation and I have no problems with an interactive audience. In fact, I would appreciate one. So it's a very counterintuitive approach. And so every process in the world has carbon in the atmosphere, has a final version of that carbon, and it has some process in the middle. So this is the general schematic of the process. But what if we create a sequence of events based on a single process? If we create a sequence of events that can give us multi-stage carbon capture or multi-stage greenhouse gas capture, right? So we keep the same personnel, we take the same costs, but we capture greenhouse gases at multiple different levels. And that is possible using this process. The third point, very important, is that it is 100% natural biosequestration. So even forests are 100% natural biosequestration, but they're better than forests. So what do we mean by natural? We mean that there is not a single unit of electricity being consumed throughout the entire value chain of the project, which means that whatever emissions are being offset by this technology are actually being offset. There is no negative input in terms of emissions. There are no emissions necessary to keep this process running. The fourth, on which I base my entire claim that this is a technology that has the potential to actually solve climate change, is that there is historical evidence of effectiveness of this approach. I will tell you that 50 million years ago, the technology I'm proposing you, there was no human to propagate this technology. Have been reduced 10 times the amount that we need as a reduction today. So it has historically been proven to work, and hence that is my belief as a scientist that it will work in the future. The fifth point, which makes it very economically competitive, is that it has the lowest capital cost and the lowest process cost of all carbon capture technologies out there in the market today, including direct air capture. And the wonderful thing about Indian engineering or frugal engineering, which we nationally call Jugaad, is that we always try to decentralize solutions, which I think is one of the three mantras of the Indian budget for the year 2023 as well: decarbonize, digitize, and decentralize. So we are hitting two of those Ds with this innovation. It can be decentralized irrespective of scale. Unlike traditional carbon capture plants, which require centralized capital, which require a lot of infrastructure and manpower at one particular site, and it cannot be decentralized because the costs do not make sense. It has to conform to the principle of economies of scale. But this is such a process that if we go for large scale infrastructure, then we follow economies of scale. But for smaller scale decentralized projects, the costs are not amplified. And finally, this process does not have a single invention. So all of the entire process is an invention of mine, but no component of the process was unknown to mankind. So all I did was I just connected the dots and made a super simple process that captures carbon at 6 different levels. So now we'll talk about the process and what it is. So it is a plant-based process. Now the plant that we're interested with is a very peculiar plant. It goes by the name of Azolla. Now, many of you may or may not know about Azolla, but I'm not the first person in the world to research about this. What I am, indeed, is the first engineer to research about this. So, I am the first scientist or engineer who's looking at this as a viable carbon negating the emissions. That whether or not we are burning coal, oil, or gas, it is beyond debate that we need to capture carbon. We need to purify the atmosphere, even if the world were to go solar tomorrow. If you do a thought experiment and think that there is not a single gram of coal, oil, or gas being burned from tomorrow onwards, and the entire world is running on solar, hydro, and wind, even then, we have 2,500 gigatons of carbon in the atmosphere that needs to be taken out. So this is a process that decouples emission sources and emission capturing. So you can give more time to these, I would say, high technology processes of source carbon capturing because they require a certain gestation time according to Moore's law. So we need to give those technologies time to gestate and perfect. But at the same time, that is no excuse for not mitigating the emissions that are already present or the emissions that are happening in real time. So this plant, I'll give you some pointers. Everybody has seen this plant. Maybe you don't know the scientific name, but whenever after the monsoon season, you visit any rural region or any water body, you will find that certain water bodies are completely green. They look like golf courses because they're covered with a particular small leafed plant. It's called a fern, but that plant in itself is called Azolla. So I got this idea because I'm not from agriculture, I'm not from botany. My educational background is that I am an electrical engineer from Jadavpur University. Then I worked with PricewaterhouseCoopers for 1 year in artificial intelligence. I did my master's in renewable energy. I'm the gold medalist of TERI. And then suddenly I decided to work on this plant for carbon capture. So there is an accident through which this innovation came about. Right. So first is this plant grows really fast. This doubles in as little as 2 days. It can survive partial shade. It grows in all climate zones of India. And it has natural species which are found in the temperate and tropical regions. Now, this plant has been researched by many scientists before, mainly as animal feed, as biofuel, or as biofertilizer. Now, out of these three, they might all sound promising, but for a multi-stage carbon capture process, we have to focus on only one, which is the biofertilizer route. Now, I'll tell you why. Because when we use it as animal feed, it's essentially undergoing respiration and the captured carbon is released back to the atmosphere. Similarly, when we use it as biofuel, it is undergoing combustion and the captured carbon is again being released to the atmosphere. So the limiting condition here is that you can be carbon neutral at best. You can never be carbon negative. However, when we employ these technologies and use it as biofertilizer, that captured carbon is utilized and stored safely at a geological time scale. So that's the only route which will allow us to do this. So I hope this slide is visible because I cannot stress the importance of this slide verbally enough. There is an event 50 million years ago in the Earth's history, which is called the Azolla event. In the Middle Eocene era, when the global temperatures average used to be 30 degrees Celsius, today it is 16 degrees Celsius. Then global temperatures used to be 30 degrees Celsius. There were forests in the North Pole. The Arctic Ocean was a closed water body. It wasn't an open ocean like it's today. Blooms of Azolla happened in the Arctic Ocean for a period of 800,000 years, corresponding to the upper estimate of it is 470 ppm reduction. As Mr. Sukumaran rightfully mentioned, that we have gone from pre-industrial, we were 280 ppm, then we were 350 ppm. Today we are almost at 430 ppm. So all we need to do is reduce it from 430 ppm to 380 ppm. Now this plant, without any influence, 50 million years ago, took down 470 ppm. That is more than our current concentration of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. We need to achieve a reduction of 40 ppm only to bring it down to pre-industrial levels. So that is why as a practicing engineer, I have so much faith in a biological solution, because history gives us evidence that this has worked in the past, and consequently it can be scaled up to work again in the future. And the solution is devilishly simple. It's not in any new technology, it's not in any new innovation, it's not in any new type of nanocrystalline solar panel. It's in something that everybody has seen once, at least once in their lives. So this is the historical evidence of why this will work. Now coming to the multi-level carbon capture. Now, I have mentioned 3 levels here, but there are actually 6. So let me start with level 0. Even before this plant comes into the picture. So this plant can be vertically integrated. What do I mean by it? This plant doesn't require unshaded sunlight. It can survive in partial shade. In fact, it prefers partial shade, which gives us opportunity to stack it up according to the principle of hydroponics, which means that the land use efficiency can be very efficiently increased, unlike forests. You cannot plant a tree on top of another tree. So the carbon capture efficiency of forests is limited by natural law. However, this is basically a joint effort by man and nature to create engineered trees. You can make these trees as many levels as you want. And that's part of my research. I know the exact dimensions depending on the latitude of a place that you can virtually, theoretically make infinite level trees. So how do you make these structures? There is only one choice that gives you carbon capture at level 0, which is bamboo, not even timber. When we use bamboo, bamboo is the fastest growing grass on the planet. It captures carbon at a rate of 200 megatons per hectare per year. Now, if we create a market for bamboo as the building material of these structures, so that is level 0 carbon storage. You're taking the carbon that the bamboo has accumulated during its lifetime and then using it as a permanent building material for your Azolla structures. Now, there is a treatment method involved which makes bamboo, hollow bamboo as well as solid bamboo durable for up to 50 years in outdoor conditions. And that is also part of the patent. Now coming to the second part of level 0, which is the fertilizer solution. We do not buy any fertilizers. We do not use any synthetic fertilizers. In fact, we use organic waste from municipal sources such as kitchens, such as office canteens. We use organic waste to create this fertilizer. Now, how is carbon capture being affected here? Because if we did not utilize this waste, it would have ended up in landfills, or it would have ended up in anaerobic digesters emitting carbon dioxide and methane, which if you recall, methane is 30 times more dangerous than carbon dioxide, which means that 1 kg of methane is 30 kg of carbon dioxide equivalent. So by utilizing organic waste for fertilizer production, we are preventing these excessive emissions from happening at a landfill. That is level 0, 2. Then we come to level 1, which is actually level 3. So the level 1 is simple carbon capture by photosynthesis. So when any plant grows, every kid knows this, that through the process of photosynthesis, plants fix atmospheric carbon dioxide into glucose, carbohydrates, which is then feeding the plant as starch. So when this plant doubles in 2 to 5 days, because it floats on the surface of water, when it doubles in 2 to 5 days, a simple ultimate or approximate analysis of the biomass will reveal the amount of carbon content, which is about 42%. Wet biomass that you harvest, you get 100 grams of atmospheric carbon dioxide that has been fixed. It's 10:1. That's the simple rule of thumb. And you can take virtually, unlike any other plant, you can take a harvest every 3 to 4 days throughout the year. So unlike other types of cultivation, which require a cultivation period of at least 2 months or 3 months, you can basically get harvest every 3 to 4 days. Now, that's very basic. This plant grows fast, so it captures carbon fast. But then you must have also heard of algae-based carbon capture solutions. So then how is this so different? This is different because this plant, like all plants, captures carbon dioxide. But this plant, as I said, is a very special plant. It does something else. It captures the most abundant gas in the atmosphere, which is nitrogen. Carbon dioxide is only 0.03% of the atmosphere, but nitrogen is almost 78%. That is why the process is called the ozonian process, because the word azo is Latin for nitrogen process. So up till level 1, we are dealing with only carbon and methane. But because this plant captures atmospheric nitrogen, we need to look at what other sectors can we offset carbon in. suppose this is a shipping convention. So I am not from the maritime sector, but I have done my research on it. But what I can propose is we all can agree that it's pretty difficult to make a ship run without emitting carbon from the ship. That technology doesn't exist yet, but it will someday. We as humans, as engineers, will make systems that exist. But what if I told you that there's an immediate way that let the ship keep running as it is? You calculate the amount of emissions. Then at point B, you capture that amount of emissions. All you need is an attribution mathematics. Right? I don't think that calculation of quantum of emissions from the maritime sector has ever been a problem in light of extremely stringent environmental audits. So that is taken care of. All we need is the source capture data, right? So what do we do with this plant once we harvest it? So as I said, we don't use it as animal feed. We don't use it as biofuel. We only use it as biofertilizer. Now, what is the benefit? Because out of the entire world, let's talk about India. India is 70% agricultural, but we still import 50% of our fertilizers. That is a serious national problem. Now, the point is the entire global agricultural food chain is now dependent on fertilizers, especially after the green revolutions in different developing countries. The problem with this is that fertilizer is a very emission intensive product. 80% of the fertilizer market is dominated by a product known as urea, which I'm pretty sure everybody is aware of. Now it takes 2.5 tons of carbon dioxide to produce 1 ton of urea. Now, when we use this biomass as biofertilizer, we are essentially offsetting the demand for urea in the market. Hence, for every ton of urea that you're displacing from the market, which you can displace through 10 tons of azolla, by the way. So 10 tons of azolla will replace 1 ton of urea, which replaces 2.5 tons of carbon dioxide. That is level 2. That is what you see on your screens as level 2, the first bullet of level 2. And the second bullet of level 2 is that when rice fields employ azolla as a dual crop, I will show you some pictures, you will understand it requires 2 inches of water to grow. It just requires shallow water. So rice fields have this dominant feature all the year round. So when you use it in rice fields, there are multiple benefits out of which one is nitrous oxide emissions and methane emissions from rice fields goes down significantly. 100 kgs of carbon dioxide equivalent. So if we prevent carbon dioxide for emissions capture. And finally, when you have this biofertilizer, when you have this compost, whatever you call it, where you use this will determine whether there's a level 3, which is actually a level 6. If we use it on agricultural land, if we use it for agroforestry, if we use it for afforestation, there is no level 3. But what I have used it for is that I have worked with different thermal power plants, and I've taken the coal scrap yard area and I've transformed non-green, degraded and desertified land into agriculturally fertile green land. So only if you do the simple thing, only if you transform non-green land to green land through land use modification, you are enhancing the carbon capture capacity of the entire landscape. And that is very difficult to quantify, but that is very assuring for us. Because whatever you quantify, you will underestimate. That is why in the field of natural sciences, landscape carbon capture mathematics is quite difficult to quantify. So I hope the 6 levels of carbon capture are pretty clear. So level 01 is using bamboo as building material. Level 02 is using organic waste diversions as fertilizer. Level 3 is the extremely fast growth rate of azolla, which makes it the fastest growing plant on the planet. Level 4 is replacing urea by using azolla as biofertilizer. Level 5 is using azolla in rice fields to suppress nitrous oxide and methane. And level 6 is using the azolla biofertilizer to reclaim or transform degraded desertified land into agriculturally viable land or just forestry. It doesn't have to be agriculturally viable, but that's also a species level conundrum that we're dealing with. Our current rate of population growth and our current rate of desertification cannot sustain this population without significant wars in the future. So if we talk about merely level 1, okay, let's forget that there are 6 levels. Let's just focus on, okay, this plant is growing. How much carbon is this plant capturing? Okay, I do not believe you as a scientist. You are too young to be credible. Let us take all these assumptions into the picture and then say, okay, how much carbon does this plant capture? So what I'm showing you is a monthly data chart. So this was last month. I tried to give you the latest data. So this is the average productivity. The hypothesized sequestration potential is based on the real data that I have. It's not theoretical, it's absolutely practical. So we have 8 locations across India spanning the 3 climate zones, out of which, so basically this figure we have to know, 7.7 kg carbon dioxide equivalent per meter square per year. According to this, now if we want to hypothesize that the globe becomes carbon neutral, the amount of effective area we need is slightly more than 1 million square kilometers. Now to put things in perspective, this is about 15% of the size of the Amazonian rainforest. And this is for global net zero. 15% of the area of the Amazon rainforest is enough to decarbonize the entire world. And that too, if we are considering only single level. If you make 2 levels, then it becomes half. If you make 10 levels, it becomes 1/10. That is the beauty of this process. Now, before we go further, right? So if you want technological engineering solutions to it, this is the slide, right? So as engineers, so as an engineer myself, my PhD was mostly focused on creating, because India as a country is blessed with a lot of climate zones, which the number of climate zones I got to experiment with, I am not sure how many countries would allow me that depth and extent of climate to do that same thing. So all it comes down to is latitude, how far you are displaced from the equator, because that determines the motion of the sun relative to your location. So depending on different latitudes, we have a function that gives us the height between, we get uniform productivity across all levels. Don't think that the bottom level is very unproductive and the topmost level is very productive. This structure, this hexahive that we are talking about, that you see on your screens, firstly, it's inspired by nature. So this field of science is called biomimicry, where we acknowledge that nature is the best engineer, and then we try to get our engineering as close to nature as possible. So the most efficient shape in nature is the hexagon. That is why honeycombs are hexagonal. That is why different bubbles put together will have. If you take the top view, you will have minimum perimeter to surface area. This ratio will be minimum only for a hexagon. You can do this through a square, you can do this through triangles, you can do this through circles as well. But the perimeter to area ratio will be minimum for hexagons. Now, why is this important? If we are looking to vertically scale a solution, we have to invest in the floors of the tanks. But how much we choose to invest in the walls of the tanks is completely a function of the mathematical designer who's designed. It stands to reason that we will have minimum materials used for the walls. Now, we are currently working with CIPET Chandrapur, the Central Institute of Petrochemicals Engineering and Technology, to develop plastic-free solutions for this. We are even using bamboo composite plastics for this. So this is an ongoing part of the project, but this has nothing to do with the timeline of rollout or the scaling up of the technology. Now, these are some preliminary data that I am allowed to share, not give out more. Actually, convinced. One in Delhi, one in Calcutta. So these are 2 flagship projects that are currently going on. We are not allowed to divulge videos or any evidence of that until the granting of the patent. But you can clearly observe. Hi, hello. I'm sorry. I think there must have been a network issue. Is my screen visible?
Yeah, screen, yeah, it's visible.
Okay, sir. I'll just continue. So if you can see that, I just want to demonstrate the concept through this. There are large scale prototypes, and see, scaling up is not an issue because it doubles in 2 to 5 days. You can do it in as big a scale as you want. But the thing is, over the last 2.5 years, I have sustainably maintained these operations in 8 parts of India. Now that is what gives me confidence that this is the only carbon capture solution that can keep running throughout the year. And this can keep running irrespective of the location, source, and magnitude of emissions. Just like you can apply it for the maritime sector, likewise, you can apply it for the energy sector, because I'm currently working in the energy sector, especially in the thermal power sector. So all you need for this process is a source that you need to make carbon neutral. Suppose we are talking about one ship. Let us assume that that one ship emits 500 tons of carbon dioxide equivalent in a year. We do that through auditing of the energy systems of the ship, right? So that is our figure to reach. Now, with the calculation that I gave you, we have a certain surface area of Azolla that we need to do. So the first thing to do is increase your surface area. Suppose you start with 1 tub. In 2 days, it becomes 2, then 4. So it increases in geometric progression. And this is the only plant that increases in geometric progression because it does not reproduce through sexual reproduction. It reproduces by breaking up. It's called vegetative propagation in biology. So if you see the structure of the plants, they grow and then they break up and then they become new plants. That is why it can double in as little as 2 days. So that is the fundamental difference between the Western approach to carbon capture and our approach to carbon capture, because I've not even started to quantify the co-benefits. Okay, these costs alone are enough to justify anything. I told you that the direct air capture has a best scaled up cost of $250 per ton. At research scale, we are at $25. We have not scaled up. So that in itself finishes any, I would say, any question of competition. It's not competitive to be 10 times cheaper than your competitor. So that's number one. Number two, even if we do not talk about carbon capture as the source, this has oxygen as a byproduct. If you observe on your screen, you will see a lot of local pollinators flocking to it in deep summers and especially post-monsoon. So it improves the air quality through absorption. It gives biodiversity hotspots to pollinator communities. It can make smaller, and it can also significantly improve the physical characteristics of soil, apart from amending it chemically, which is like the point of using it as a fertilizer. A simple thumb rule. So let us assume a single level Azolla cultivation. Let's take 1 square meter of Azolla cultivation. If done through the Ozonian process, which is a particular process that I have developed through my PhD and have filed for a patent on that as well. If done, 1 square meter of Azolla cultivation is equal to 18 square meter of the most productive ecosystem on earth, which is the Amazon rainforest. 1 square meter of this plant grown the right way is equal to 18 square meters of the largest and densest rainforest on the planet. So imagine if we stack this, it becomes even more. If you have a 5 level, it becomes 90 times, right? So 1 square meter of land will be equivalent to 90 square meters of the Amazon rainforest, if done that way. And simultaneously, you can make fertilizers closer to the place of consumption. You can create employment. You can solve carbon capture. You can solve climate change within a very realistic period. So if you talk to me as a scientist, not as a businessman, so I would theoretically give you the optimism that if we start today, it will take 610 days to decarbonize the globe, if we get the support and the resources that we need. So I believe that's
can you
a
expedite?
very...
Surya, I'm sorry, I'm interrupting you,
Yes,
but
sir.
can you
So
expedite?
I'm done, sir. I don't think anything can trump this promise of decarbonizing the world in 610 days. So I think I'll leave it at that.
You can conclude, but take your time.
Thank you so much,
Just
sir.
expedite. I'm sorry to...
No, sir, I think I was done. I was just wrapping up anyway. Yes, sir.
Have you concluded?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. He concluded, sir.
Anyway, thank you, Suryadip. As I admitted, this topic of carbon capture is fairly new. As a matter of fact, at IMO also, we have started talking about carbon capture only from last 2 meetings. And last meeting, India also did submit a paper on this. So I would be interested to know more about the Azonian process, okay, whether it is what
Sure.
sort of a process is this? Okay, whether like we have a carbon absorbent processes, we have solid porous material processes and all those. So what exactly this process leads to, but how you intend to carbon capture? Because eventually we are eyeing for net zero by 2050.
Hmm.
That means whatever carbon dioxide is produced is being absorbed. So we will be very interested to know this. I will be in touch with you. So
Hmm.
thank you so much. And my apologies again for rushing you through. We have one more panelist actually, and time is running
No,
out.
sir,
So-
no issues, no issues.
no, Amit Kumar
No,
sir, saying you are an executive committee member yourself of Institute of Engineers, and I believe executive committee member UTSC and Institute of Engineers Dehradun. So I will cut short your introduction also, and I hope you will see that how soon you can conclude. Amit Singh.
Thank you, sir. Good day to all. I will try to keep very short because a lot of things has been already said by earlier panelists. And it's honor me to part of this webinar. Respected Chief Guest, Sir Shri Ajit Kumar, Dr. G. Ranganathan, President I, Dr. B. M. Bhandatkar, and all my presentation panel, my seniors, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for this giving me opportunity to present onboard carbon capturing shipping. So as you know, it's more than so as we know, like global shipping industry emits more than 1 billion tons of carbon annually.
There is something wrong with your.
And, and like IMO has already have documentation of the CO2 emission. The speaker was asking to, I'm audible?
Yeah, Amitji, I suggest you switch off your slides so the audio at least we can listen to you. Amitji, do you hear me? Amit Kumarji, do you hear me?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
What you do, you switch off your video so that we can hear you, your audio very clearly.
All right, sir. So, sir, actually, sir, I just want to show the one case study of the carbon capture on board, which was done by the Mitsubishi, and where the by post-process reaction, this CO2 can be liquefied, and after that, it can be offloaded to the shore facility to further utilization. That was the main focus. So if slides are not visible, I hope we can conclude here, and thank you for this webinar participation.
Anyway, thank you, Amit Kumar. I'm sorry. I mean, there were some problems there, but nonetheless, thank you so much for cutting it short. I just like to summarize what Dr. Shridhar Mukherjee told about carbon. This a lot about global warming and climate change. I can only assure you, Shri Mukherjee, that at MEPC we are very seriously debating and considering that is actually our main topic today of net zero. And coming to what Suryadeep said, our now this carbon capture and storage is remaining another very challenging issue. And I must say, and under Mr. Sukumaran's delegation leadership, we are every MEPC India is now one of the premier spokesperson on various topics, whether it is I mean, we are only not limiting to air pollution. We are diversifying to other pollution aspect like plastic pollution, like garbage pollution, noise pollution, etc., etc. So the topics are very interesting, but this carbon capture is fairly new. So this we would like to have more details on this. So before that, I will say that Mr. Mukherjee, you have dealt with the topic very nicely, and I said it is a very problematic and issues are very challenging. And as Mr. Sukumaran also rightly said, more or less it is more political today. Because ever since our 1990, I mean, Kyoto Protocol of 97, which was, they didn't agree, then Paris Agreement, they are not following because they promised to give $100 billion every year. They have not given even once. At last MEPC, we did try to formulate a new maritime fund where we also propose that we will subject our bunkering to levies, that every ton we charge levies and you, but that also created a lot of problems. So issues are very vast. But I must say that this global warming is very, very challenging today, and everyone is after that. But at the same time, there is a vast distinction between developing countries and countries which are in the polluters, because India is still harping that polluters must pay as per the Paris Agreement. And even Mr. Modi, our Prime Minister at the COP28 also said that to expect that fossil fuel will be taken out so soon is impractical. He didn't say that we don't want to, but he says that the shipping trade has to continue. But trade has to be maintained. Business cannot be stopped or economics cannot be allowed to dwindle. So fossil fuel will continue till we have equally good alternative fuels and all other bunkering facilities. So issues are very challenging as a matter of fact, and it is very interesting to have this sort of interaction, seminars, and gather more information. So with that, I will conclude that. And though I know we are running short of time, but I see some questions there. If
Yes.
Mr. Mehra, will you take? Please.
Okay, fine. Because I saw one question that is there regarding the 7,500 square kilometer of India's coastal line. Now, this one, I have some direct experience actually. If you are aware that Bengal was hit with Amphan and the speed was about 150 kilometers, I think 235 kilometers, 150 miles per hour, something like that was the speed. And I can tell you, one of the best constructed building designed by Singapore in India, where I have an apartment with everything properly done. Also, one of the window from the 37th floor was completely blown away. And there were many other people faced that. Now this, I cannot say there is a solution to this one. That was unexpected. Probably they did not take that into account, because I had met up with the architects in Singapore who were the designers of the building. And I think they never had that metacentric data with them, that this can go up to 150 miles per hour. And that is number one. And if you see 7,500 square kilometer, there has been always rise. Seawater has been rising. Now, according to the knowledge I have, that coastal line has 30-40 millions of people. So I do not know what is the solution, but yes, we have to address that point. And I know Mr. Sukumaran has said, and you also just now said, whether it is geopolitical, what is the story, where will all the trillions will come, whether our rich nations are funding the other ones. And other most important, I'll close now, USA, UK, Germany, all have polluted a lot, which I think he gave some numbers. I fully agree. Now, all developing countries, according to me, will continue to produce greenhouse gases. There is no choice. For that, they cannot shut down their economy. They cannot stop the jobs of the people. Now, I leave it to Mr. Rai, because this subject is very vast, and I'm ready to join another seminar on the subject, because Dr. Bhaskaran is trying to plan many, many things. And I don't know what is the next topic he will come up with. But yes, I will always provide my intake. And we have the privilege of doing some research, and we are planning to do something for a country like India, We have applied for, actually the application is by Dr. Basak directly on his name on the IP. And hopefully when that is obtained, if we get support from the India government, we can produce the world's best carbon capture system, and we will use that for the farmers. We'll convert that captured carbon to fertilizer, and we are 100% certain that we can do that. And that will be done at 1/10 of the international cost. And the initial capex is about 1/20th of the capex mentioned by other countries. I have seen the other countries' capexes and I've compared, and let's see whether India government gives us the IP, and then we'll talk further from there. I leave it to Mr. Rai to take over and discuss. And I know he is highly talented, intelligent, and Mr. Sukumaran seems to know everything about OPT 28. Maybe I'll have to send an email to write more than what I have learned.
Mukherjee, I may even inform you, as far carbon capture is concerned, the Department of Science and Technology, Government of India, has recently set up 2 national centers of excellence in the areas of carbon capture and utilization. They are National Center of Excellence at Indian Institute of Technology, IIT Bombay, and the National Center in Carbon Captures and Utilization at Jawaharlal Nehru Center for Advanced Scientific Research in Bangalore. So probably you may like to in touch with them. As a matter of fact, under Mr. Sukumaran only, we are in touch with these both organizations. And based on that, we did submit a paper to IMO about carbon capture issue. Because as Suryadeep said in his presentation, net zero actually means that we have to absorb whatever carbon. Now the methodologies are varying. As I said, whether we are using solid porous material or we are chemical absorbent or we are converting into this or something. So that of course will be depend, and that is why I wanted to know more about Azonian process, what system it follows. So with that, any more questions if there, Mr. Mehra, can you see there?
Sir, right, sir.
Yeah.
Mr. Sauryadeep, thank you very much for very nice and innovative presentation. IMU, Indian Maritime University, they promote innovation for the budding marine engineers. So if you have small part of your research that we can work out with Indian Maritime University, we have a innovation council there. I am one of the member of that. So I will talk to you one-to-one after this. Second, just to supplement what respected Mukherjee sir said, in a recently held COP28 in Dubai, our Honorable Prime Minister Narendra Modi ji, the great global leader, he has mentioned very clearly 70% population contributing to 17% of pollution, carbon, while 30% of global pollution, the population of developed countries, they are contributing 83%. This is one of the most dissimilarity which as a global citizen will have to address. Thank you.
Yes, sir. You have given a very good statement, actually. If you see the contribution from US nowadays, the carbon emission is round about 10%, where India, China is 20%. But if you go back many years ago, you will find that USA has contributed much more. And Japan is 5%, Germany is somewhere there. So these are the 5 countries if you take it. So that is why, again, we go back to geopolitical subject. Yeah, okay.
Anyways, Commodore Bhandarkar, our maritime industry is already in touch with IMU, particularly with the IMU Vice Chancellor, and she herself is taking a lot of interest in the IMO matters. And last few years, they are even conducting mock drills, etc., where the IMO mock drills by the IMU. So IMU, we are in touch, but as I said, carbon capture is fairly new topic, and we like to have more and more information and what we can do, because this is not been taken up in a big way at IMO, which we intend to do in future. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, I think with that, we'll conclude our discussion and hand over to Commodore Bhandarkar and our compare, Mr. Mehra.
Sir, there are two important questions. One is hydrogen. It says that the generation of water vapors by hydrogen as a fuel will create more amount of vapor in the atmosphere. Then one more important question is there about Azolla plant. Can it be grown in seawater? Mr. Saurabh, you can answer this question.
Yes, sir. Sir, is it all right if I answer both of them?
Yeah, you can answer.
Yes, okay, you can do that.
Okay. Right. So I'll answer the second question first. So no, Azolla cannot grow in seawater. However, what we have designed at Delhi School of Advanced Studies is a simple solar thermal desalinator device where you can just input seawater. It's essentially a heat exchanger that is raising it beyond the boiling point. So we have all the condensate left in form of the salt, and we get distilled water as the output. So yeah, that's actually a very intuitive question, and I know why that person asked the question, because I said that it grew in the Arctic Ocean and then it solved climate change 50 million years ago, right? So that's a huge physics thing. So basically, seawater then was denser than the rainwater that was falling. So basically, rainwater had created a 2 millimeter thick film, and this is very recent scientific knowledge. In fact, we got to know about this in 2016 when there was an Arctic expedition in which a 2 kilometer long ice core was excavated, and then the analysis of the sediments revealed this data. So this is very, very new scientific knowledge. Now, coming to the first question, that will transitioning to a hydrogen economy lead to increased global greenhouse gases. So the science of greenhouse gases is not as simple as I might have made it sound. You cannot quantify one greenhouse gas in terms of the other greenhouse gas. There are multiple parameters. Like number one is, so we do this global warming potential based on average lifetime and the amount of heat trapping it does. So while water vapor is a significant greenhouse gas, the residence time of water vapor in the atmosphere is very less for it to become a threat like carbon dioxide has become. So carbon dioxide is a threat not just because of its warming potential, but also because of its high residence time. Water vapor, on the other hand, because it is part of the water cycle, it keeps going and coming and going and coming, and the global water regulation system takes care of that. So the water cycle is much more stable compared to the carbon cycle, which is why currently the planetary crisis is regarding carbon and not essentially water. So the problems with water are pollution. With the problems with carbon are equilibrium. So that's, I hope that answers the question.
I will just butt in for a minute for Dr. Bhandarkar to know. I think he probably was looking for another answer. This production of hydrogen is an expensive stuff, and then that is something to be seen. Then disadvantage to transport. All these factors have to be considered. Disadvantage is it is flammable. I just make it short. It is highly flammable. Now, whether rest of the stuff Dr. Bhandarkar can take over to save time.
Mr. Mehra, please.
Right. Thank you, gentlemen. We are to the end of our webinar now, and I will request Mr. Bhushan Raj to give us the vote of thanks. A brief on Mr. Bhushan Raj. 30 years he's been sailing on the high seas, marine engineer, and 10 years he's put after that in Bernard Schulte as senior technical superintendent and auditor. He is the honorary secretary of Amazing Nautical Association. Mr. Bhushan Raj, all yours.
Sir, we cannot hear you.
Sir, cannot hear you. You have to go closer to. No, Bhushan, I think you better come here.
Yeah, sorry. Sorry about that. There seems to be some disruption. First and foremost, apologies on behalf of Dr. Deshmukh, and now the mic again. So my apologies for both. Yeah, so I was reading out a famous saying by Marcus Tullius Cicero, the great Roman orator and lawyer. It says, gratitude is not only the greatest of virtues, but the parent of all others. I can't thank everybody enough here. Everybody, to start with Commodore Bhandarkar, and then there was engineer Anand Javanjal, and then the chairman of Blossom, Sridev Mukherjee, as well as his colleague Sauradeep Basak. The macro view which has been defined, again, I want to touch upon the additional DG, the various politics of which he referred to. And I can't help but comment on the responsibility, the politics of responsibility, because that fundamentally defines today our ability to respond. That's how I would simplify the word responsibility. Our ability to respond, the earth and all of us, various engineers, various people from various walks of life and industry. So it's been a wonderful macro and micro view by everybody. There's been some new technologies, new thoughts, new sciences. And Surideep Basak is doing his research that is very interesting and a way to go, as our moderator SM Rai Saab has said. I have been listening to Rai Saab, and what always impresses me is the manner in which he fills up with all the extra information which he's done so much of research on. Thank you so much. That's a huge thing to learn in case I choose to moderate sometimes. Yeah. And Amit Kumarji, thank you very much. I'm sure we'll catch up again on another forum. It was unfortunate that there was a little bit of glitch despite the digital age. Yeah. Thank you, everybody. God bless you all. Thank you very much. Thank you. Have a wonderful evening. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody, for giving us the opportunity to discuss the subjects. Thank Dr. Bhaskar, Mr. Rai, the chief guest, and all of you. Yeah, thanks all the speakers also.
Right, Commander Bhandarkar, so with your permission, we'll close the webinar.
Yes, sir. Kindly close the webinar.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Bye.